Welcome to Democracy Does, the Civic Power Playbook, a podcast that cuts through the noise to explain what's really happening in our democracy. Each episode breaks down key issues with insight from policy experts and change makers, giving you clear tips to take action. Whether you're fired up or feeling stuck, you're in the right place to get informed and get inspired, because democracy works best when we all participate. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Democracy Does, the Civic Power Playbook. Today, we are joined by Freeda Cathcart. She is a grassroots organizer, an advocate, a mother, a grandmother, and founder of Common Sense Coalition Guide. It's an organization that creates a safe and informed space for people to talk about what is happening around the country and how policies are impacting their community, your community, all of our communities. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me here. I'm excited about what you do.
Yeah, well, we want to talk about what you are doing because I want to know, what was the impetus for creating the Common Sense Coalition Guide? Why did you feel the need to do that?
Well, I have over 30 years of grassroots organizing experience and bringing people together in organizations to create coalitions. And I got really sick with Lyme disease last year. And about this time last year, I was dying. And I saw a specialist, and I'm in complete health right now. Um,
Oh, that's
but my
great.
husband died 2 years ago, and when you're faced with mortality and morbidity, and you see the moment that our country was in a year ago, it feels differently this year than it did last year at this time. I mean, I think for everybody, not just me, when it comes to the fear and the intrepidation of what was going to happen next. And I think it's been worse than what at least I imagined it was going to be. But what I was hopeful for as a historian was that Americans wouldn't take it. And I kept reassuring people that we weren't China, we weren't Russia or Hungary, um, or any other dictatorship like Iran, that we're Americans and that people came here because of who we are and the rights and the promise, the land of opportunity, and the freedoms, as imperfect as it's been. There is the hope of the people continuing to learn and grow and form a more perfect union. I think the founders knew that they hadn't reached their final goal when they created the Constitution, but set up checks and balances to allow that to happen, and we see that happening through the decades, and to this day, we see that happening where when we're challenged, the people um, will rise up and say, we like to be safe, we like our neighbors, we want to live in peace, and we want the freedom to have our rights respected. Um,
I want to ask you about that because you host a number of workshops or community groups gatherings that get people talking about what's happening, and you do get a cross section of people. There's farmers, there's teachers, there are religious leaders, there's small business owners, people who cross party lines. And when you've been having these workshops, what have people been
Well,
saying?
that's my favorite part of it, is bringing people together to find out there's much more that we have in common and things that we care about than things that are divisive. And I think the big challenge that we're facing today, and the impetus for that brought about where we are right now, is the isolation of social media and the purposeful division, the clickbait, and then you get more clicks with anger than you do with solutions and feeling good. Um, and we see other countries making course corrections to rein that in, and we're starting to see that here. Um, but bringing people together in person, especially, um, is really helpful, and especially when you're talking about your families and communities. And the way the Common Sense Coalition workshops have been designed is to, at the at the very beginning, there's an icebreaker where you're pairing people up and they're getting to learn each other. Why did they first do something that was a political action? And I'm not talking about partisan. I'm talking about, like,
Uh-huh.
getting a stop sign on your block in your neighborhood type stuff, you know?
Right.
Like, when you ask people, like, "When was the first time you contacted somebody in the government or signed a petition or made a phone call? What was it that motivated you to do that?" And people's, stories are, really interesting, what that first spark was that made them take action, and, having that share that with their partner and hearing their partner's thing, it creates that sense of a bond of that you're a human being that you care about, you have values. You have values that cause you to take action, and you are not alone. Even though they might be different values and actions that were taken, you still have that foundation, and I think that's what makes us so special.
What do you think having workshops like this is doing for where we are right now in terms of political discourse and how policies are impacting people on the day to day?
I What I have seen come out of, the coalitions I've been a part of or, like, with these workshops, and I need to follow back with people that attended the workshops actually, because they just started in July. This is a fairly
Uh-huh.
new thing. There hasn't been a lot of them. It's just the response was so positive from them, and people seemed so grateful, and I could feel their sense of hopefulness at the end of it, was why I created a
Oh,
guide because anybody can do it. The guide will tell you, like, how to create the event, like, the steps to do it and how to follow up with it, and I a lot of people kept wanting me to do more workshops, and I didn't have the ability to travel and do everything that I wanted to do, and so
yeah.
I was just like, this moment really we all need to rise to, and as people will say, like, "Do whatever you can." I'm like, "Well, I'm a writer. I can write down what this is and throw that out there and just encourage people to give it a try. Give it a try."
And but what do they take away from doing something like this when you have a farmer and a teacher and a small business owner and again people who cross party
Yeah.
lines? What are people taking away from this and how are they applying that to their day to
When you
day?
bring people together with different perspectives and what's happening with their lives, you just take something, for instance, like the deportations that are happening, and especially in rural areas, and you bring people together, and you have the farmer who can't find the laborers that are afraid to either come or if they've disappeared to harvest their crop that they have, and then you have somebody who works in the hospital as a nurse saying that they are overwhelmed because the people that used to help work in the healthcare field, aren't showing up because they're either scared or they've disappeared too. And then you have, um, the businesses who say that people used to come and it used to be busy at lunchtime, and now people aren't coming, or they can't find the person to wash the dishes or be the waitress, and you start seeing the intersection of, what is happening, the and how that they're all being affected by a very bad policy that's hurting, um, the entire, structure that's happening right now and how it's undermining it and putting stress and on everybody. So when you create that space to bring people together, you start hearing about the impacts in real life that is happening
Mhm.
and why, um well, then you open the door to say, "What are you going to do about it?"
Yeah. Yes. And that exactly is another question because I think a lot of people feel like they don't know what to do. They feel confused, they feel scared. And there are so many things coming at people right now, whether it's the immigration issue, whether it's the economics of what's happening, whether it's
Yeah.
healthcare, people losing their healthcare. So, how are you telling people to apply what they have discussed in the guide to practice in their daily life? What does that look like?
So, when it's wrapping up, so the whole point is, like, bringing people together, build relationships to solve community problems. In a 2-hour
Okay.
workshop, you're not gonna solve your community's problems. So you're laying the foundation, but what I do when as the organizer and what will be in the guide is whoever organized it
Yeah.
is there's a place to collect the data, and you ask people, like, if you don't want to have your data shared with other people, let the organizer know. Nobody has refused to do that, but it could happen, and everybody should give consent. But what I've done after the workshops is I sit there and I make a little spreadsheet, and I have everybody's data information so they can contact each other, and I put down the different organizations they belong to, because that's where you find out that somebody belongs to the Kiwanis Club, or they belong
Mhm.
to um, the NAACP, and all these
Yes.
different, or they belong to a place of worship, and you see all these different little
Yes.
connections and stuff, and so that's listed there too. So you have their contact information, organizations they belong to, and stuff. And then I send resources of different things, depending what I heard in the workshop,
Oh.
where they were going. I especially send resources, for instance, like with the immigration things, there are organizations that are helping to support immigrant families, or definitely information about how to contact their representatives on the federal, state, and local level, and encouraging them, like, to have a teach-in. Like, there's some people who oftentimes, like, when you bring people together, there's usually 1 or 2 or more experts in certain areas, and everybody else might be, like, interested in it, but they don't know, and they could offer a teach-in. And you can do something like that in the local library. Then you have the organizations to promote the event for the teach-in, for instance, on how the deportations are hurting your community, and bring people together. And then that's where you have the synergy. When you're bringing people together, you're learning, you're growing, that the solution evolves out of that. And that's
Mhm.
the point of it. That's what I have seen over the decades of experience of I have, is when you bring coalitions together, they will create the solution. They'll figure it out, and it's so important to have everybody there and to set aside, for instance, one of the first experiences I had was working to get the midwives legal in Virginia.
And that's where you're based, and that's where you've been. I wanna make sure I clarify to our listeners who are all over that you are based in
Yeah.
Virginia, and that's where you are starting this experiment, so to speak, is in
Yeah.
Virginia.
So in the late 1900s, we started working to get the midwives legal in Virginia. It really started kicking in like 2000. And we were told it was going to take
Mhm.
decades before we could do that. We're a very small part of the population, no power. So we were up against the Virginia Medical Society, and basically we had no power, no money. Um, we were like, we have to figure it out. And within 5 years, we had figured it out. And one of the things we figured out was we built a coalition of pro-life and pro-choice activists, and we were able to get our legislation in both of their legislative packets. And when it got to the floor of the General Assembly, it passed unanimously in the Senate, and only, I think, like 4 or 6 delegates voted against it in the House. So we were like, whoosh, once we did it.
Wow, and what was the legislation? Was it to make
It was
midwives
yeah, legal, so that they had to be a certified professional midwife, but it's direct entry midwives, the ones that do apprenticeships and have experiences. So it wasn't like somebody could just call themselves a midwives and suddenly be legal. But for the ones that were experienced and did the work, and there is a professional designation of certified professional midwife, that they would be legal and not harassed anymore. It was a big deal for those of us that had home births with midwives, because depending on your experience, if things weren't going well at home and you transported to the hospital, lots of times you weren't treated very well at the hospital, because they didn't
Mm.
respect. They treated like you were an abusive person. That's the type of stuff we had to overcome. They called us child abusers, and said it would be like driving your car off a cliff without a seatbelt. I mean, just painted us in like these these horrible.
Are you a trained midwife or you just had a natural birth and you
I'm a
had
childbirth educator.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
okay, excellent. Well, I love the story because it perfectly illustrates how you can cross party lines with an issue that impacts so many
Not just
people.
party lines, but political lines, pro-life and pro-choice people working together on something. Now, it's not over, because then 2 years later, based on that experience, we brought pro-life and pro-choice activists from across the country to a conference in Atlanta, Georgia, for a weekend. We talked about all sorts of things, everything except for abortion. We talked about breastfeeding, miscarriages, women being shackled when they gave birth in prisons. There were so many things that we agreed upon that needed to be changed through legislation and education that has come out of that weekend. For instance, not shackling women when they're giving birth in prison. That's like torture that they were doing to women.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. So, what does that tell you about where we are today? Because some people would argue that we are so divided, we are beyond repair, and we cannot course correct. Do you think that's true or not? And tell me why or why not.
I think it's not true at all. I think what they need to do is stop watching TV and getting off the internet and get out in their communities and meet real people that are really doing the best that they can. Most of them are really good people. And when you talk about them, and you can hear the buzzword talking points, and steer away from
That's
that.
right.
Don't start
Yeah.
arguing with them and be a purist that, like, you have to use this particular language. Find out, what it is that they care about. Do they care about the health of mothers and babies? Well, how are we gonna care about them? How can we work together for that, to make sure that that happens so that you're learning and growing together rather than, judging and condemning?
Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad you mentioned that point because I think communication, how you communicate with people is key in terms of finding solutions, which you illustrate beautifully in your with your Common Sense Coalition guide. Two more quick questions. One is when you do the guide, I'm just curious, do you curate the questions? How do you decide what is on the agenda for the day? What's in the worksheet?
I do hardly any talking during a workshop. It's my favorite part about doing the workshops because 'cause they're always different. Because it's who shows up. It's literally
Mhm.
the beginning of it is pairing people up and getting them to connect with each other, and then they introduce their partners when you go around. Lots of times when people are waiting their turn, they're thinking about what they're going to say, but by pairing them up and getting them talking to each other, they're connecting with each other, and they stop thinking about what they're going to say about themselves. And you have to pay attention to your partner because 'cause you've gotta introduce your partner to the group when they go around. So so then
Interesting.
you don't have to worry about what to say, you just have to pay attention and really listen to what the person is telling you, and then you go around, and then as a facilitator, as they go around, you can hear, like, what their interests are and everything, and there's an exercise at the very beginning when they come in where they, end up starring the 2 top issues that really sparked them in the first place, and except for one time, everybody, their top issues was what sparked them in the first place, and that's one of the things I really encourage people to do is think about what sparked you in the first place because that's probably what's going to keep you going, to be able to give you that energy to tend to that fire, because if you look around it, because there's a sheet that has all the different issues, veterans, um, healthcare, education, like, there's, like, a whole sheet of things, there's, like, everything. Some people check off like, I'm checking, like, all of them. It's just like, Okay, don't worry, you can check all of them. Check whatever's real for you." But then I narrow it down, I help them narrow it down so it's just 2. And then when you go around with a large group of people, almost always all the issues are covered by other people. And so I really want them to witness that in real time, that even though they care about veterans too, that wasn't what first sparked them. But there's somebody in your group that's what sparked them, and they know all sorts of things that's going on with veterans affairs and stuff like that. So, like, they might say, like, "Hey, I'm going to do a prayer vigil for veterans." Benefits that they get the health care access that they need to, and they send it out to the group and say, "Can you let your organizations know we're doing a prayer vigil for them?" And then they can do that, and then instead of having 3 people for a prayer vigil, you might get, like, dozens of people that turn out because they might not have time to spend all their time on Veterans Affairs, but, yeah, come out for an hour in prayer and stand shoulder to shoulder with people for the people that defended our country, that served our nation. Hell yeah. I'll be there. I'll light a candle.
Are you surprised by the response that you've gotten?
Yeah, especially when I've read the evaluations afterwards, which, like, I don't know who they are when they walk through the door. I hear about their experiences, I see them interacting with each other, but I don't know who they are until after they leave. And just, I mean, I've been impressed by all the people that have come to it, but their expertise, their experience, their education, and everything, it's like really intimidating. I'm glad I didn't know who they were before before we started.
What does that tell you to have the caliber of people, the range of people, the level of interest? What does that tell you about the response to your
The
initiative?
people that would be attracted to come out to this type of workshop, I think, are the people that are interested in learning and growing and really making a difference in their community. And when you bring people like that together, they're always phenomenal, amazing people. You can't go wrong.
Okay. Well, then, one of the things I always do when we wrap up from the show is I call it the power plays. When I talk to advocates, grassroots organizers, experts, what what are the power plays? Three top tips that you would recommend to someone who is in a community who says, "I am frustrated, I'm scared, I don't know what to do, but I want to do something." What are three tips you would give them?
Get connected with other people. You are not alone. And it's interesting when somebody reaches out, and lots of times they do it, like, through my Facebook page and stuff like that, just today, a guy from Fredericksburg, reached out and he said, "I wanna do something in Fredericksburg." I was like, "Okay. Are you connected with any groups there?" "No." And I said, "Well, have you gone to this site?" And he went and he didn't find a group where he was, and I said, "That's okay. I know people in Fredericksburg. I will connect you with the people in Fredericksburg. There are people in Fredericksburg for you to connect with, just because that one site didn't work." But um, th there are people everywhere, and so that has to do with, like, reach out. Like, if you really don't know where to start talking to people. Try and go to, like, look on your community bulletin boards and things, and see, like, what's happening, places of worship, and I don't know, whatever sparks you, whatever, like, if there's an environmental thing, like, even your government, parks and recreation, like, what are you guys doing? They last times need volunteers to get ivy off of trees or something like that. And once you get with groups of people, get off the computer, and this seems weird because here we are. Thanks for watching.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but and this is good, but then you need to live a life outside of the computer. We need villages, we
Yes.
need to connect with each other. So that is my main thing, is to connect with people. And again, really try and learn and grow, and don't judge and condemn. I would really say that's really
Mhm.
important, because likely somebody is going to say something that rubs you the wrong way. I mean, Thanksgiving with your family, that happens to me all the
Yeah,
time. You know,
absolutely.
using that type of mindset when you're in your community, and, like, they're an extension of your family, and to be more into
Yes.
learning and growing, and building a relationship, a healthy relationship, rather than judging and condemning, can make a big difference.
Excellent. That's great advice. Get connected, get involved, learn, and communicate. I think those are great, great tips. Freeda Cathcart, thank you so, so much. Tell us where we can find information about the Common Sense Coalition Guide, either how we can go to one of your workshops or create one of our own. Where can we find more
I would
information?
love people to use the guide to create one of their own, and, of course, come to a workshop. If you're near
Mhm.
one, come to one that's already existing, but I really hope people take it. It's really simple. It's commonsensecoalitionguide.org is gonna be the website, and it's just gonna be out there available for people, and, there'll be a way to connect if you want some tips beforehand, uh you can do it. Talk. Happy to do that, for people who want to give it a shot, because it's just a lot of fun. It really is, and a lot of it's the organizing, and when you're there as a facilitator, it's really just keeping the flow going and listening to people and moving it along. There's not much that the facilitator does. It works itself out, and you have the tools and everything to, like, move from one thing to the other. But Common Sense Coalition Guide.org. I know it's a long name, but anyhow.
No, no, but it's common sense and it's a guide. So all one word. That's
I
terrific.
do wanna give props to Thomas Paine's Common Sense. That's what,
Mm,
really
yes.
motivated me, and it was published on the 250th anniversary of Thomas Paine's Common Sense. Was January 10th was his 250th anniversary, and so I did have it published that day. Even though the website's not up, it is the Facebook page is up, and there's a link to it that's very crude, and the website's nothing fancy either, but the information's there, and, I think the important thing is to get in person and connect with people. I'm gonna see about doing some virtual ones, actually. I'm trying to think how we could
Okay.
do it virtually.
It's all possible, but yes, stay tuned and you give us hope and encouragement that change is possible. Thank you so much, Freeda Cathcart. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much.
Now it's time to recap Frida's top 3 tips. First, she says, don't isolate. You're not alone. Get connected to other people. Number 2, don't know where to start? Look up where like-minded folk might meet. You never know who you'll meet who could be a supportive ear. And finally, she says, get involved, participate, volunteer, learn, and talk. And if you want to learn more about Freeda and her guide, you can go to commonsensecoalitionguide.org. Thanks so much for joining us. We hope you're feeling a little more hopeful, a little less stuck, and maybe even inspired to take action, because democracy does work when we all participate. And don't forget, sign up for our newsletter to get updates on when our next episode drops. You can go to my website, democracydoes.com. And as a bonus, if you haven't gotten one, a free and easy tip sheet on how to get involved.